Hey, sweetheart, what's your call sign, mop lady? 40 officers laughed. She didn't even look up, because she'd heard worse. Because the mop in her hands was steadier than any weapon they'd ever trained with. And because in 6 minutes, every single one of them was going to regret this moment for the rest of their careers. The Admiral kicked her bucket over, just to make her flinch. She didn't flinch. She caught a falling clipboard 6 inches from the water. Bare hand, perfect reflex, the kind you only get from watching men die in your arms. Then he made the biggest mistake of his career. He handed her a rifle, told her to prove she knew what she was talking about. 11 seconds later, that weapon was in pieces on the counter, perfectly clean, perfectly timed, and the room went silent, because nobody in that hallway had any idea they were standing in front of a ghost. A woman the United States Marine Corps had already buried once, until today. The corridor at Camp Ravensworth smelled like bleach and gun oil. That particular Tuesday combination. The one that meant maintenance had just finished the floors and the armory down the hall had just finished cleaning weapons for the morning qualification runs. Mara Whitlock pushed her mop in long even strokes and did not look up when the laughter started. Because she never looked up when the laughter started. Not anymore. Admiral Roy Bannister's voice hit the corridor like a dropped tray of silverware. Loud, metallic, designed to be heard. Hey, sweetheart. His boots slapped the polished tile as he crossed toward her, trailed by the usual entourage. What's your call sign, mop lady? The group around him laughed on cue, trained seals clapping for fish. Lieutenant Derek Voss grinned that particular grin. The one that said he'd been waiting all week for something to happen. And finally something had. Chief Petty Officer Grady Holt didn't even bother hiding his amusement. Just doubled over like Bannister had told the funniest joke in naval history instead of mocking a woman who cleaned toilets for a living, or appeared to. 40-some personnel in that hallway. SEALs heading to the range. Admin staff with coffee going cold in their hands. Instructors between classes. All of them turning, all of them watching. Because watching was easier than doing anything else. Mara kept mopping, small. 5'4" in boots she wasn't wearing today. Just the standard issue maintenance coveralls, 2 sizes too big, sleeves rolled twice at the wrist. Dark hair pulled back so tight it looked like it hurt. Nothing about her said anything except invisible. Except, don't look here. Except, nothing to see. But Master Sergeant Danny Walsh, leaning against the equipment counter with a clipboard he'd stopped reading 3 minutes ago, felt something crawl up the back of his neck. He'd felt that particular cold slide down his spine exactly twice before in his career. Both times right before something very bad happened to somebody. The way she held that mop. Wrong. Grip too high. Weight distributed through the balls of her feet instead of her heels. Shoulders square to the exits instead of square to the floor she was supposedly cleaning. That wasn't how you mopped a hallway. That was how you held a weapon you didn't want anyone to notice was a weapon. Come on. Don't be shy. Bannister stepped closer. Close enough that Mara could smell his aftershave, something drugstore and aggressive. Everybody's got a call sign around here. What's yours? Silence. The good kind. The kind that makes a crowd lean in. Squeegee. Floor wax. The laughter came back louder this time. Voss actually slapped his knee. Because apparently that was the funniest thing anybody had said all week, and Mara paused. Just for a second. Straightened up slow, the way a person straightens when their spine remembers something their mouth has decided to forget, and something moved across her face. Not anger. Walsh would have understood anger. Anger, he could read like a weather report. This was colder than anger. Quieter. The kind of look that made his hand drift, unconscious, toward the sidearm he wasn't even wearing on base. Then it was gone. She lowered her head, went back to the mop. But something had already shifted in that hallway. Something none of them could name yet, because in the next 20 minutes, everything they thought they understood about the woman with the mop was going to come apart at the seams. And not one of them saw it coming. Walsh watched her eyes left corner, high right, low center, exits, threats, every 3 seconds, like clockwork, like a metronome nobody else could hear. That wasn't a woman scanning for dirt. That was tactical awareness. The kind drilled into a body until it stopped being a decision and became a reflex. The kind that saved your life in places most people never had to think about. She wasn't looking at the floor. She was reading the room, like it might kill her. Commander Vivian Sloan caught Walsh staring and misread it completely. Because that's what people do when they've decided who someone is before they've bothered to look. Sergeant's defending the help now. Her voice had a particular cruelty in it, the kind that only comes from someone who fought hard for a seat at the table and can't stand watching anyone else get handed one for free. Maybe she needs a man to speak for her. Mara's jaw tightened. Almost nothing. A flicker. Still she said nothing. Voss pushed off the wall. Actually, I'm curious now. He gestured toward the armory window, 3 rifles mounted in sequence behind the reinforced glass. Hey, maintenance lady. Since you're cleaning our facilities, why don't you tell us what those are? Mara looked up, slow, deliberate. Her eyes, unremarkable brown at first glance, moved across the rifles with an intensity that made Walsh's breath catch somewhere behind his ribs. M4 carbine, a COG optic, M16A4, standard iron sights, EOTech holographic. Voss's grin faltered, because those weren't the names civilians used, those were designations. Precise, one. Lucky guess, Holt said, stepping forward, all 220 pounds of him, moving like a man who'd never once in his life had to move quietly. Probably heard some jarhead throw those words around. And to punctuate the point, because apparently that's what large men do, when they want to feel important, he kicked her mop bucket clean over. Grey water spread fast across the polished tile. A metal clipboard, sitting on the edge of a nearby desk, teetered, slid, started falling toward the spreading water. Mara moved. Her hand shot out and caught it 6 inches above the surface. Not grabbed, caught, clean, precise. The kind of hand-eye coordination that comes from thousands of hours of repetition. The kind that means the difference between a grenade landing where you were standing and a grenade landing somewhere it can't hurt anyone. The corridor went silent. 3 full seconds of nothing. Then Bannister laughed again. But it came out thinner this time. Forced. Good catch. Maybe you should try out for the softball team. Corporal Jamie Anderson, 22 years old, part of the maintenance crew and the only person on base who'd bothered learning Mara's actual name in 6 months, stepped forward without thinking. Admiral, sir. With respect. Maybe we should. Bannister didn't even look at him. Did someone ask for your input, Corporal? No, sir. Then keep your mouth shut. Bannister turned back to Mara, who had already retrieved a second mop and was cleaning up the spill with the same steady rhythm she brought to everything. You know what I'm curious about? You've got all access clearance. That's unusual. For maintenance. She reached into her coverall pocket without breaking stride and produced a badge. The magnetic strip caught the fluorescent light. Level 5 clearance. Full base access, including restricted training areas. Voss snatched it from her hand, turned it over. Examined it the way a man examines something he's already decided must be fake. How does a cleaner get level 5? Background check cleared 6 months ago. Her voice was level, flat. You can verify with security. From the 2nd floor medical office, a window overlooking the corridor, Dr. Renata Alvarez watched the whole thing unfold with a slow, cold dread building in her chest. She'd treated Mara twice. Once for a scraped knuckle, once for a shoulder that acted up in cold weather, the kind of old injury that never fully heals right. Both times Mara had shown a pain tolerance that didn't match her paperwork and an encyclopedic knowledge of trauma response that a maintenance worker had no business possessing. Alvarez had made a note in her private log both times. Hadn't thought much of it beyond that. Now, watching the predatory circle of officers tighten around one small woman, she felt something in her gut scream that this was going somewhere very wrong. Because Bannister was warming up now. 20 years, he'd spent clawing his way to that rank, and he could feel the crowd's attention on him, like sunlight, and this was his base, his command, his moment to enjoy. Tell you what, sweetheart, since you seem to know so much about our weapons, why don't you walk us through proper maintenance procedure for that M4 you identified? Shouldn't be hard. Not for someone with all-access clearance. Mara set down her mop. She walked to the armory window and pointed without touching the glass. Barrel requires cleaning every 200 to 300 rounds, more frequently in high particulate environments due to fouling. Bolt carrier group cleaned and lubricated every 500 rounds minimum. Gas tube inspected, not cleaned, unless malfunction presence. Buffer spring replaced every 5,000 rounds or upon failure to return to battery. Magazine springs are the most common point of failure and should be rotated on a schedule. Voss's face had gone from smug to something closer to uncertain. Anyone can memorize a manual, he said, but the edge had already left his voice. You want a practical demonstration. It wasn't a question, it was a door opening. Bannister waved toward the armory. Get that M4 out here. Let's see what the help actually knows. Staff Sergeant Collins, the armory NCO, hesitated. Sir, regulations require. I'm aware of regulations, Sergeant. Get the weapon. Collins retrieved it, cleared it, locked the bolt to the rear, and set it on the counter with the discomfort of a man following an order he didn't like from a rank he couldn't refuse. Mara approached the weapon. Her hands moved before Walsh could fully process what he was seeing. Field strip. Upper from lower. Bolt carrier group extracted. Firing pin out. Bolt broken down. Charging handle. Buffer spring. Every component laid in a perfect row. 11.7 seconds. Walsh knew that number because he'd checked his watch without meaning to. 11.7. The SEAL qualification standard was 15. Special Operations Standard, 13. Only a handful of operators in the entire military consistently broke 12. She reassembled it in 10.2. The corridor had gone completely, totally silent. Even Bannister had stopped smiling. Lieutenant Commander James Brooks, arriving for his shift and freezing in the entrance the moment he registered what he was watching, felt something cold settle in his stomach. He'd seen that speed exactly once before. In a classified briefing about Force Recon selection standards. His eyes narrowed on the small woman calmly handing a rifle back to Collins like she'd just finished folding laundry. Lucky, Voss said, because he had to say something. Probably practices that party trick at home. Want me to do it blindfolded? The question came out flat. No arrogance in it, no challenge, just fact offered like a weather report. Nobody answered, because that was the moment Colonel Marsh arrived with his inspection team. 3 Pentagon observers on a quarterly facility review and took one look at the scene. The wet floor, the kicked-over bucket, the circle of smirking senior officers around one small woman in maintenance coveralls holding a disassembled rifle. His expression darkened fast. What exactly is going on here? Just some entertainment, Colonel, Bannister said, smooth as poured concrete. Maintenance worker here was showing off some skills. Marsh's eyes moved across the scene with the practiced coldness of a man who'd built his career on reading exactly this kind of situation. And this seemed like an appropriate use of command time. With respect, sir, we were simply... I didn't ask for a justification, Admiral. I asked what was going on. His attention fixed on Mara. Your name and position. She met his eyes without flinching. Mara Whitlock, maintenance crew, 6 months on base. And you have weapons handling certification because... Previous employment, sir. Previous employment doing what? I'd prefer not to say, sir, before we go further. If this story of hidden warriors and instant karma is already getting under your skin, go ahead and hit that subscribe button right now, because we bring you real stories about the people everyone underestimates until the moment they can't be underestimated anymore. And trust me, what happens in the next few minutes is going to change how you see this entire hallway. Now, back to the story. Because Admiral Bannister is about to make a mistake that's going to cost him everything he thinks he's built. Holt stepped forward, smelling blood in the water. Colonel, I think we should verify her credentials. This is starting to smell like stolen valor. Some people like to play dress-up with skills they don't actually have. Mara's expression didn't change, but Walsh saw her shoulders shift, almost nothing, a half-inch, into something more balanced, something combat-ready, and he was fairly sure she had no idea she was even doing it. Fine, Marsh said. Someone call security. Let's verify the credentials she's so reluctant to discuss. While they waited, Sloane circled her closer, her instinct for social dominance kicking in like a reflex she couldn't override. You know what I think? I think you're one of those groupies who hangs around bases, hoping to get attention from real operators. Maybe you dated some enlisted guy who taught you a few tricks, and now you think you're something special. Nobody in the hallway moved. Petty Officer Ellis Marsh, no relation, a fresh graduate, barely 3 weeks out of qualification, standing near the back and watching the whole thing unfold with growing unease, noticed something none of the senior officers had bothered to catch. Mara's breathing hadn't changed once, not through any of it. 4 count in, 4 count hold, 4 count out, 4 count hold. Box breathing. The kind of stress technique they spent weeks drilling into new operators until it became automatic. She wasn't doing it on purpose. She wasn't doing it on purpose because she couldn't turn it off. Security arrived with her full personnel file. The officer in charge, a senior chief named Dobbs, looked confused as he read it. Ma'am, your file shows all certifications current. Advanced weapons handling, tactical medical, combat driving, close quarters combat, survival, evasion, resistance, escape. This is an operator's qual sheet. Not maintenance, all legitimate, Marsh pressed. Yes, sir. All verified through proper channels. Background check cleared by Naval Intelligence. No flags, no issues. But her employment record only goes back 6 months, Holt protested, because he could feel the ground shifting under him and didn't like it. What was she doing before that? File doesn't say, Chief. Just shows she was cleared for employment after standard investigation. That's not standard, Sloane said. You don't get level 5 clearance and this qualification list without a service record. Where is it? Not in the file, ma'am. Bannister saw his opening. Then I propose a practical test. We've got the combat simulation range available right now. If Miss Whitlock is really qualified for everything on that list, she should be able to demonstrate it. And if she can't, we file a report for falsifying credentials. Brooks stepped forward, his instinct screaming at him. Admiral, I'm not sure that's... Are you questioning my judgment, Commander? No, sir. Good. Miss Whitlock, you're invited to the range. Consider it professional development. Mara looked at him. A long moment. Then quietly. Sure. The word hung there like a grenade with the pin already gone. The group moved as one toward the combat training facility. Word had already started spreading through the base, the way word always does. Faster than anyone officially telling anyone anything. By the time they reached the range, the observation gallery held more than 50 personnel. SEALs in training, instructors, admin staff, even a few civilian contractors who'd heard something interesting was finally happening at Camp Ravensworth. The range master, a grizzled senior chief named Petrov, met them at the entrance. Admiral, we need a proper safety briefing if you're bringing in someone untrained. She's got qualifications, Bannister cut him off. Just set up standard operator assessment. Petrov looked at Mara, really looked. And something in his expression shifted the way a man's expression shifts when 15 years of experience finally recognizes something his gut had already known before his brain caught up. Yes, sir. What level difficulty? Let's start simple. Static target shooting. We'll escalate if she's actually competent. Choose your weapon. Miss Whitlock, Bannister said, magnanimous, generous, already tasting the victory he thought was coming. The armory offered standard training weapons, M4 carbines, M9 pistols, Sig Sauer P226s. Mara walked past all of them to a secure locker at the back. May I? Petrov raised an eyebrow but nodded. She opened it and removed a Barrett M82A1, 50 caliber, 29 pounds unloaded. Voss actually laughed. You can't be serious. That thing weighs more than you do. She lifted it with proper carry technique, weight distributed across her frame like it was nothing, and walked to the firing line. In her small hands it looked almost absurd. Several people in the gallery pulled out phones, anticipating a viral video of someone's humiliation, because that's what people expect when small women pick up big guns. Walsh closed his eyes for half a second. He'd fired a Barrett exactly once in his life. His shoulder had ached for a week. Target distance? Mara asked. 800 meters, Bannister said, generous as a man handing out enough rope to hang somebody. It was an impossible shot for anyone outside specialized sniper training. She loaded a single round, settled into prone position, looked through the scope. Her breathing slowed, steadied. 10 seconds passed. 15. She was reading wind, calculating drop, measuring variables nobody in that gallery could even name. The shot cracked like a slap of thunder across the range. 800 meters downrange, the center of the target exploded. Petrov checked through the spotting scope, dead center. Holy, Bannister's jaw worked. Different distance, make it 1200. 3 more shots. 3 perfect hits. She adjusted for wind, for distance, for the smallest shift in elevation. Every round found its mark. When she stood, there wasn't a trace of strain on her face. No bruising from recoil, no discomfort, just calm, professional efficiency. The kind that only comes from having done this so many times, it stopped being difficult and started being breathing. Sloane's face had gone pale. Where did you serve? What unit? I said I'd prefer not to discuss my previous employment. That's not an option anymore, Marsh said, his voice losing its earlier dismissiveness completely. Those shots aren't luck. That's trained skill. High-level trained skill. Which was when the base's medical monitoring system logged something unusual. A maintenance worker accessing the advanced trauma database with credentials that shouldn't have existed on that account, because modern military installations have started running biometric credential systems designed to identify qualified emergency responders in seconds during a crisis. A silent net designed to catch exactly the kind of person nobody expected to find, and it had just caught one. Petty Officer Ellis leaned toward Brooks. Sir, her breathing. She's still doing box breathing. Hasn't broken pattern once. Brooks nodded slowly. He was putting pieces together, and he did not like the shape they were making. Admiral, I strongly recommend we stop this demonstration. And what, Commander? Let her walk away without explaining how a maintenance worker shoots like a scout sniper. Bannister wasn't backing down. His ego had fully taken the wheel now. Miss Whitlock, pistol transition drill. Let's see if you're as good with a sidearm. Petrov set it up reluctantly. Mozambique drill. 2 rounds center mass. 1 round headshot across multiple targets. Under time pressure, the SEAL standard was 3 seconds for 3 targets. Mara picked up an M9. Checked it with the automatic precision of someone who'd done the motion 10,000 times. Stepped to the line. Ready, Petrov called. Set, go. The shots came so fast they blurred into a single sound. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 3 targets. 3 rounds each. Perfect Mozambique pattern. The timer read 0.9 seconds. Someone in the gallery whispered, "That's not possible." Dr. Alvarez had come down from her office, drawn by the crowd. She stood at the back, watching with a certainty growing colder by the second. She'd seen those hands before during the exams. Old scars in specific patterns, rope burn on the palms, knife defense marks on the forearms, a particular callus formation that only comes from thousands of hours handling weapons. She'd done her residency working trauma. She knew what operator hands looked like when she saw them. Voss, desperate to claw back some ground, stepped forward. All right, shooting drills are one thing. Let's see how you handle close quarters. Petrov set up the kill house, multiple rooms, doors, corners. Every scenario an operator might face clearing a structure. Targets popped randomly, some hostile, some marked civilian. Even experienced SEALs sometimes failed this drill. Mara walked to the entry point, paused, studied the layout, nodded once. Ready. What happened next would be reviewed on camera footage for the next 3 hours by increasingly bewildered tactical instructors. She cleared the facility using movement patterns that weren't standard military doctrine. They were something more efficient, something that minimized exposure while maximizing coverage. She identified and engaged 12 hostile targets while avoiding 8 civilian markers, all in 41 seconds. Current base record was 57. But it was the technique that made Sergeant First Class Reyes, running the simulation, freeze the footage and replay it 3 separate times. That's not SEAL close quarters doctrine. That's not Army. That's not even Delta. Then what is it? Someone asked. Reyes shook his head slowly. I've seen movement like that exactly once, in a training reel out of Quantico, Force Recon. The gallery had gone entirely silent. Sloane stepped down from the observation platform, her face a mask of confusion and anger, and something underneath both that might have been fear. You need to tell us right now who you are. This isn't a game anymore. Before Mara could answer or not answer, the base intercom crackled to life. Medical emergency, close quarters training area. Medical emergency. All qualified personnel respond. Holt, watching from the armory doorway, let himself smile just slightly. He'd arranged this. A staged training accident. A junior sailor bribed to fake an injury requiring immediate trauma response. Mara would fail, be exposed, and Holt would be vindicated in front of every officer on base. Everyone rushed toward the training area. A young sailor named Doyle, Holt's co-conspirator, lay on the ground clutching his chest, simulating a tension pneumothorax, difficulty breathing, uneven chest rise. It was convincing enough that half gallery looked genuinely alarmed. Mara knelt beside him in one smooth motion. Her hands moved across his chest, checking, assessing. She looked up at Alvarez, who'd arrived with the emergency kit, 14-gauge needle. Alvarez's eyes widened. That was the correct treatment. But it was an advanced procedure. Most maintenance workers had no business knowing. You know how to perform needle decompression. Yes. Mara took the needle, located the landmark, second intercostal space, mid-clavicular line, her fingers finding it without hesitation. Then she paused, pressed her fingers more firmly against Doyle's chest, checked his breathing again, looked at his eyes, the slight nervousness there, the kind that doesn't belong to a man actually dying. Stand up, she said quietly. I can't. I need stand up. Her voice carried something that made Doyle obey. Before his brain had even finished catching up to the order, he stood, breathing perfectly fine. Bad acting, Mara said to the room at large. Real pneumothorax presents with tracheal deviation. His trachea is midline. Real patients don't grab their chest symmetrically. They favor the affected side. His pupils should be dilated from pain and hypoxia. They're normal. She stood, handed the needle back to Alvarez, turned to Holt. Did you set this up? Holt's face had gone the color of old paper. I don't know what you're. You wanted me to perform an invasive procedure on a healthy man so you could charge me with assault. Her voice stayed calm, but there was something underneath it now. Something cold, sharp, and entirely finished with pretending not to notice. Alvarez stepped forward. Chief Holt, if this young man isn't actually injured, we need to have a serious conversation about waste of medical resources and misconduct. Which was when the base commander's voice cut through on someone's radio. All personnel be advised. Incoming VIP, General Marcus Ellery, commanding officer, 2nd Marine Division, arriving for surprise inspection. All section heads report to main briefing room in 15 minutes. The crowd began to disperse. The drama interrupted by the sudden logistical panic of preparing for a general's arrival. But Bannister wasn't finished. Miss Whitlock, this conversation isn't over. You'll report to my office at 1500 hours to provide a full accounting of your background and qualifications. She met his eyes. With respect, Admiral, I don't report to you. I'm a civilian contractor, not active duty. Then consider it a request, one you'd be wise to honor. If you'd like to keep your job. She nodded once. 1500 hours, your office. As the crowd thinned, Walsh approached her, cautious, like a man approaching something he wasn't sure was safe to be near. Ma'am, I don't know who you are, but you might want to have a JAG representative present for that meeting. She looked at him. Really, looked. And for just a moment something in her expression softened. Thank you, Sergeant. I appreciate the advice. Can I ask you something? Off the record. You can ask. That tattoo on your shoulder. I saw it when your collar shifted. That's not just a random design, is it? Her face went carefully blank. I need to get back to work. She walked away, leaving Walsh standing in the corridor, more certain than ever that he'd just watched the opening act of something that was going to change this base permanently. In his office, Holt was already making calls, trying to verify Mara's background through unofficial channels, friends who owed him favors. If she was a fraud, he'd expose her. If she wasn't, and that possibility had started to feel more and more likely with every passing minute, that terrified him more than he wanted to admit even to himself. Sloane sat in her own office staring at replayed footage of Mara clearing the kill house. Over and over. The efficiency, the precision. This wasn't someone who dated an operator and picked up a few tricks. This was someone who had done this for real, in situations where mistakes meant somebody didn't come home. Sloane had spent her entire career fighting to be taken seriously as a female operator. She'd endured hell to earn her position. And here was this quiet maintenance worker who moved like... She couldn't finish the thought. If you're hooked on this story, the way I think you are, hit subscribe now, because things are about to get very real, very fast. The pieces are already coming together, and what happens next is going to leave you speechless. Drop a comment with what you think her real story is. Now let's get back to it, because everything is about to change. Voss sat in the armory, methodically cleaning his own weapon, trying to process what he'd just seen, that disassembly speed. He'd been teaching weapons handling for 8 years. He knew where the ceiling was for talented amateurs and gifted instructors. What he'd just watched was something else entirely. A level he'd only seen referenced in classified briefings. Names that showed up in redacted files, not on maintenance rosters. At exactly 1500 hours, Mara Whitlock walked into Admiral Bannister's office. She'd changed into clean coveralls. Hair still pulled back tight. She looked small, unremarkable, completely out of place against the dark wood and framed commendations lining the walls. Bannister sat behind his desk, flanked by Sloane and Marsh. Voss stood near the door, arms crossed. Holt lurked in the corner, still trying to look like a predator instead of what he actually was, which was a man watching the ground disappear beneath his feet. "Sit," Bannister ordered. She remained standing. "I prefer to stand, sir. That wasn't a request. With respect, Admiral, I'm not active duty. You can't give me orders." His jaw tightened. This wasn't how he'd pictured this meeting going. "Fine, stand, but you will explain your background, your qualifications. Why you're working maintenance when you clearly have specialized training. I'd prefer not to discuss my previous employment, and I'd prefer not to have a mystery operator working on my base without full disclosure." He leaned forward. "Here's what I think. I think you washed out of whatever program you were in. Maybe couldn't handle the pressure. Maybe failed the psych eval. And now you're clinging to whatever you managed to retain. Trying to feel important by impressing people." Something flickered across Mara's face. Just for an instant, then it was gone. "Or maybe," Sloane added, her voice sharp with resentment, "you were never actually in a program at all. Maybe you're a very good actress who learned the lingo and practiced the moves and tried to pass yourself off as something you're not. We've seen it before." "Stolen valor," Holter said from his corner. "It's a crime. We could have you arrested." Mara's phone buzzed in her pocket. She glanced at it. A message from a contact saved only as Dad's nurse. 3 words, "He's asking for you." She allowed herself the smallest breath before returning her attention to the officers arrayed against her like a jury that had already decided the verdict. "Call security," Marsh suggested. "Let's get this sorted officially. Full background investigation, polygraph if necessary." Voss pushed off from the wall. "I'll make the call." As he reached for the phone, the door burst open. Chief Warrant Officer Priya Nair, slightly out of breath, tablet clutched against her chest. "Sir, sorry to interrupt, but I have those search results you requested." "This better be good, Nair," Bannister growled. "You asked me to run a deep background check on Mara Whitlock." Nair held up the tablet, her face pale. "Sir, I found something. Multiple somethings." "But there's a problem." "What problem?" "The file is classified. Seriously classified. I only got access because General Ellery authorized it when he heard what was happening on base. Sir, I need O6 clearance minimum just to open the full record." The room went very, very quiet. Marsh stood. "I have O6 clearance. Let me see that tablet." Nair handed it over, reluctant, like she was handing over something that might bite. Marsh's eyes scanned the screen. His face moved through a remarkable series of expression: confusion, shock, disbelief, and finally something that looked disturbingly close to horror. His hand holding the tablet began to shake. "This can't be right," he whispered. "What?" Bannister demanded. "What does it say?" Marsh looked up at Mara, really looked at her, seeing her completely differently now. When he spoke, his voice was thick with something none of them had heard from him before. "I served with your father," he said, "in Fallujah, Second Battle, November 2004. Staff Sergeant Walter Whitlock." He never told me. He couldn't finish the sentence. "Told you what?" Sloane stepped forward, trying to see the screen. Marsh turned the tablet so they could all see. The classification header was bright red. Top Secret Psi. Below it, a personnel file. And at the top, in bold letters, "Whitlock, Mara Captain, USMS. Force Reconnaissance." The room seemed to tilt. "No," Bannister said flatly. "That's not possible. Force Recon doesn't take." He caught himself. But the damage was already done. "Doesn't take women?" Mara asked quietly. "They do now," Marsh said. "Have been for years. You'd know that if you kept up with core developments outside the SEAL community." "Force Recon is one thing," Holt said, his voice starting to crack around the edges. "That still doesn't explain the skill level we saw today." "Keep reading," Marsh said, his face gone gray. Nair pulled up the next section. Mission history. 51 successful operations. Deployment dates spanning 6 years. Locations still classified. A list of commendations that scrolled on for pages. Navy Cross. Bronze Star with Valor Device 3 times. Purple Heart twice. Dozens of other citations underneath. And then, at the bottom in stark black text, Steep Kia Presumed, Helmand Province, August 2019. "She's dead," Voss said stupidly. "The file says she's dead." "Presumed Kia," Mara corrected. "Means they didn't find a body. Means I was alone behind enemy lines for 21 days before I made it to friendly forces. Means the Corps declared me dead. Because statistically nobody survives that long in that terrain under those conditions." Sloane had backed up against the wall, her face gone ashen. You're actually Captain Whitlock," Marsh finished. "Call sign." He looked at her. "The file won't load your call sign. That part's redacted." "It would be," she said. "Call signs for certain operations stay classified." Bannister had gone very still. His earlier swagger had evaporated completely. "Ghost Unit," he whispered. "Your Ghost Unit. I don't know what you're talking about, Admiral." "Don't." His voice had gone hollow. "I've sat in the briefings. There are less than 24 Ghost Unit operators in the entire history of Force Recon. You're..." He looked like he might actually be sick. Holt had slumped against the wall. He'd physically staged an assault on a superior officer. Not just any officer. A Ghost Unit operator. His career wasn't just over. He was staring down the barrel of a court-martial. Nair pulled up another section. "Sir, there's more." She read aloud. "Reason for civilian placement. Status change. Voluntary retirement. Compassionate leave granted. Father, Staff Sergeant Walter Whitlock, USMC retired. Suffered traumatic brain injury. February 2020. Subject requested discharge to provide full-time care. Request granted with honors. Current residence, Virginia. Current employment, civilian contractor, Camp Ravensworth Maintenance Division. Cleared for Level 5 access due to previous service and ongoing security clearance status." The pieces clicked into place, one after another, like a lock finally finding the right key. She wasn't here hiding. She was here because her father needed her, the man who'd raised her, who'd served 25 years, who'd been wounded in Fallujah. Marsh's Fallujah was dying and she'd given up everything to take care of him. "How long?" Marsh asked quietly. "How long does he have?" Mara's mask cracked, just slightly. "Doctors say 6 months. Maybe less." "And you've been here 6 months?" "Yes, sir." The silence stretched long enough to feel like its own separate room. Sloane had a hand over her mouth, tears streaming down her face without permission. Voss had turned away, unable to meet Mara's eyes. Holt looked like he wanted the floor to open and swallow him whole. Bannister stood slowly. Every ounce of his earlier arrogance had burned off completely. "Captain Whitlock." He couldn't find the words. "It's fine, Admiral. It's not fine. Nothing about this is fine. I mocked you, I called you." He couldn't repeat it. "You didn't know," she said. "That's not an excuse." He straightened. I owe you an apology, a real one. In front of the same people who witnessed my behavior. That's not necessary, Marsh cut in, Captain. With respect, it absolutely is. A knock at the door interrupted them. A junior officer stuck his head in. Sorry to interrupt, sir, but General Ellery requests Admiral Bannister. Colonel Marsh. He checked his notes, and Captain Whitlock. Report to the commanding officer's briefing room immediately. Mara's expression shifted to something like resignation. He read the file, she said. Yes, ma'am, and he specifically requested your presence. They walked through the corridors in a strange procession. Word had already spread the way it always spreads on a base this size. Faster than anybody officially telling anybody anything. The mysterious maintenance worker was Force Recon, was Ghost Unit, was decorated beyond anything most of them would see in a lifetime of service. Personnel stopped and stared. Some came to attention as she passed. Others pulled out their phones, because apparently that's the reflex now, even for something this quiet, this sacred. By the time they reached the briefing room, a crowd had already gathered outside. Walsh, Ellis, Brooks, Dr. Alvarez. Dozens of others who'd either witnessed the confrontation directly or heard about it secondhand within minutes. General Marcus Ellery stood at the head of the briefing table, tall, late 50s. The weathered face of a man who'd spent decades in places most people would never have to think about. When Mara entered, he came to attention immediately and rendered a full, formal salute, held perfectly still until she returned it. The weight of that gesture hit everyone in the room like something physical. A two-star general had just saluted first. That only happened for one reason. Respect that went all the way past rank and landed somewhere deeper. Captain Whitlock, Ellery said, his voice formal but warm underneath it. It's an honor to finally meet you in person. Your reputation precedes you, though I wish the circumstances were different. Sir, she said, standing at attention, every inch the officer, despite the coveralls she was still wearing. Ellery turned to Bannister. His voice went cold. Admiral, I've reviewed the incident reports from today. Multiple witnesses, video footage, several very concerned personnel who felt something was deeply wrong about how events unfolded. Would you care to explain? Bannister's face had gone pale. Sir, I had no knowledge of Captain Whitlock's background or service record. The way she presented, Ellery interrupted, his voice dropping into something genuinely cold, was as a civilian employee doing her job, a job she took to be near her dying father. A father who served this country for 25 years and earned his retirement through blood and sacrifice. And you decided the appropriate response was to publicly mock her, question her credentials, force her into demonstrating capabilities she clearly wished to keep private. Sir, I'm not finished, Admiral. Ellery's presence filled the room the way weather fills a valley. Do you understand why Captain Whitlock's call sign is classified? Do you understand why Ghost Unit designations are kept in sealed files? Bannister shook his head, mute. Because operators at that level make enemies. Real enemies, state-level threats, organizations that would pay a great deal to know their identities. Captain Whitlock's face, her real name, her location. All of that was protected information. And today, you forced her to expose her capabilities in front of more than 50 personnel, many of whom recorded it on their personal devices. The implication landed hard in the room. Her safety had just been compromised, her father's safety, all of it because of ego and entertainment. Mara said, with respect, the operational security concerns can be managed. I knew the risks when I took this position. Today's events were unfortunate, but not catastrophic. That's generous of you, Captain. Ellery studied her. Too generous. But it raises the question, why here? Why this base? You could have taken a position anywhere. A consulting job paying 6 figures. Instead, you're mopping floors for minimum wage. Proximity, she said simply, to the traumatic brain injury program at the medical center. Best specialists in the region. My father gets treatment there twice a week. This base is 12 minutes away. 15 from our apartment. The math was simple. Almost unbearably simple. Colonel Marsh spoke up, voice rough with something he hadn't expected to feel. Sir, if I may. I served with Staff Sergeant Whitlock in Fallujah. He was my platoon sergeant, saved my life twice in that city. I had no idea his daughter was. He gestured, helpless. I should have recognized her. Nobody was supposed to recognize her, Colonel. That was the entire point. Ellery pulled out a chair. Captain, please, sit. The rest of you too. We need to discuss how we move forward from here. They sat around the briefing table. An admiral, a colonel, a 2-star general, and a woman in maintenance coveralls who outranked most of them in every way that actually mattered. Ellery pulled up a file on the briefing room screen. I received a call approximately 30 minutes ago. They're aware of today's incident. They're also aware that Captain Whitlock's cover, such as it was, has been compromised. They're offering several options. Sir, I don't want to return to active duty, Mara said immediately. My father, I know, Captain. These options account for that. He clicked through the presentation. Option 1, full identity protection protocol. New name, new location, new employment. Your father relocated to a facility near wherever base you choose. All medical care covered. That would disrupt his treatment schedule, Mara said. His doctors know his case. Starting over with new providers could cost him months he doesn't have. Understood. Option 2. Enhanced security at current location. Protective detail, surveillance, active threat monitoring. You continue current employment, but with a security footprint that would defeat the entire purpose of trying to live something close to a normal life. My father is already struggling with memory and cognition. Adding security teams to his daily reality would confuse and upset him. Ellery nodded. Option 3, and this is the one I'm personally recommending. You accept a position as a training instructor here at Camp Ravensworth. Official title, official rank recognition, appropriate pay grade. You'd work with SEAL and Force Recon candidates, teaching real-world combat techniques. Hours flexible enough to maintain your father's care schedule, and your presence here becomes explained, normalized, which makes you less of a target, not more. Mara considered it. Teaching would expose me to hundreds of students over time. Any one of them could compromise operational security. True, but they'd be vetted personnel with security clearances. And frankly, Captain, your operational security is already compromised. The question isn't whether we can maintain a fiction that's already broken. It's how we manage the reality that's left. Sloane spoke up, her voice quieter than anyone had heard it that day. Sir, if Captain Whitlock accepts an instructor role, I'd like to request assignment as her liaison officer. I owe her that. I need to make amends for today. Noted, Commander. Captain Whitlock would have final say on that assignment. Ellery looked at Mara. You don't have to decide right now. Take 24 hours. Talk to your father if his condition allows. I understand, sir. Good. Now, regarding today's other participants. His gaze swept the room. Admiral Bannister. You'll be issuing a formal apology at tomorrow morning's base-wide formation. You'll explain that you were unaware of Captain Whitlock's background and that your conduct fell below the standards expected of officers. You'll also be enrolling in a mandatory course on respectful leadership. Questions? No, sir. Commander Sloane. Same apology. Same formation. Additionally, you'll be writing a personal letter to Captain Whitlock detailing exactly how your behavior contradicted the values you claim to represent. That letter will be reviewed by your commanding officer and placed in your permanent file. Sloane swallowed hard. Yes, sir. Colonel Marsh. You're assigned as Captain Whitlock's primary point of contact for anything related to her father's care or her own security concerns. You served with Staff Sergeant Whitlock. You know what he sacrificed. Make sure his daughter has everything she needs, sir. It would be my honor. Chief Holt. Ellery's voice went colder than it had been for anyone else in the room. You staged a fake medical emergency designed to embarrass and potentially implicate Captain Whitlock in an assault charge. You physically kicked over equipment belonging to a superior officer. You've been conducting unauthorized background investigations using personal contacts. You're confined to quarters, pending formal court-martial proceedings. Security will escort you out. Holt's face had gone gray. 2 security personnel entered and flanked him. As they led him toward the door, he looked back at Mara. I'm sorry, he whispered. I didn't know. You didn't care, she said quietly. That was the problem. The door closed behind him. The room felt larger for a moment. Empty. Voss raised a hand, tentative. Sir, what about me? I participated in the mocking, the challenges. Yes, you did, Lieutenant. You also recognized skill when you saw it. Even if you didn't want to admit it at the time. You'll be assisting Captain Whitlock with weapons training classes. Should she accept the instructor position, consider it an opportunity to learn from someone who's actually used these skills where it counted, not just on a range. Yes, sir. Ellery stood. The rest of you, Walsh, Ellis, Brooks, Dr. Alvarez, you're here because you either tried to defend Captain Whitlock or recognized something was wrong before the rest of the room caught up. That's noted and appreciated. Dismissed. They filed out, leaving Mara alone with the general. He waited until the door closed and something in his formal bearing loosened just slightly. Off the record, Captain. How are you really doing? She took a breath. Honestly, sir, I'm tired. My father has good days and bad days. On good days, he remembers me. On bad days, he thinks I'm my mother, who died when I was 12. The doctors say the injury is progressing. Every week, he loses a little more. I'm sorry. He was always proud of my service. Showed everyone my commendations, even though he wasn't supposed to talk about them. Now, he can't remember most of it. Sometimes he asks when I'm deploying, and I have to remind him I retired. It breaks his heart every time. Like hearing it for the first time. Her voice stayed steady, but her eyes had gone bright. So no, sir. I don't want to go back to active duty. I don't want security details or a relocated identity. I just want the time I have left with him to be as normal as it can be. Then we'll make that happen, Ellery said, his voice gentle now. And Captain, what you're doing right now, taking care of your father, that's as important as any mission you've ever run. Don't let anyone tell you different. Thank you, sir. One more thing, your call sign. The file won't load it for me, but I heard Bannister say Ghost Unit, and he looked genuinely terrified. I've been in this business 35 years, and there are still operations I don't have clearance for. I'm guessing your call sign is tied to some of them. She met his eyes. I'd prefer not to discuss it, sir. Fair enough. But if you ever want to talk about anything, my door is open. We take care of our own. Even the ones who don't ask for help. She stood and saluted. He returned it, crisp and final. As she turned to leave, he called out, Captain. For what it's worth. Force Recon made the right choice when they selected you. And the Court lost a damn fine officer when you retired. The Corps didn't lose me, sir. I'm still a Marine. Just in a different way now. Outside the briefing room, a small crowd had gathered. Walsh, Ellis, Brooks, Alvarez, dozens of others. They snapped to attention as she emerged. Some saluted. Others just watched with expressions somewhere between awe and shame. Corporal Anderson pushed forward. Ma'am? I wanted to say I'm sorry. I should have defended you more strongly. You stood up when it mattered, Corporal. That takes courage. Don't apologize for doing the right thing. Ellis approached next. Captain, I'm a new graduate, still learning, but watching you today, the way you handled everything, that taught me more about professionalism than 6 months of training did. Thank you, she said, nodding. Being a good operator isn't about how many push-ups you can do, petty officer. It's about keeping your head when everyone around you is losing theirs. Remember that. Dr. Alvarez stepped forward last. I reviewed your medical file with General Ellery's permission. The injuries you sustained during that evasion in Helmand. She shook her head. The fact that you're walking, functioning, working, it's remarkable. If you ever need anything, medically or otherwise, please don't hesitate. I appreciate that, Doctor. Brooks pulled her aside as the crowd began to thin. Captain, I need to tell you something. About 3 weeks ago, I saw you in the break room. On the phone, speaking a language I couldn't place. I almost reported it as suspicious. Now I realize you probably speak 6 languages, and that was just normal for you. Mara allowed herself the smallest smile. 5, actually. And yes, I was talking to a former interpreter who worked with my unit overseas. He made it stateside with his family. Lives about 2 hours from here. I check on him occasionally. See, that's what I mean, Brooks said. You're this incredible combination of lethal operator and genuinely good person. It's humbling. If you haven't subscribed yet, do it right now. Because you are about to witness one of the most satisfying reveals you'll ever see on this channel. Share this video with someone who needs to remember what real respect looks like. Alright, here's what happened next. The next morning, at 0800 hours, the entire base formation assembled on the parade ground. Over 800 personnel in dress uniforms, standing in perfect ranks under the pale Virginia sun. At the front, Admiral Bannister stood at the podium, his face carefully composed, his discomfort still visible underneath it. Mara stood off to the side, now wearing proper utilities. Marine Corps camouflage with captain's bars, her uniform crisp despite having been folded in storage for over a year. She'd debated wearing it. General Ellery had insisted. Respect earned deserves recognition. Bannister cleared his throat. Yesterday, I made a serious error in judgment. I publicly mocked and challenged a civilian employee of this base, making assumptions about her character and capabilities based on her position and appearance. I subjected her to unnecessary tests designed to humiliate. I created a hostile environment and violated every principle of leadership I claimed to uphold. His voice was steady, but the words clearly cost him something to say. What I didn't know, what I should have taken the time to learn, was that this woman is Captain Mara Whitlock, United States Marine Corps, retired, force reconnaissance operator with 6 years of distinguished service. 51 successful missions, more combat decorations than most of us will see in a lifetime. She took a maintenance position at this base for one reason: to be near her father, a retired Marine who requires specialized medical care. The formation had gone completely silent. You could hear the wind moving across the parade ground. Captain Whitlock had no obligation to prove herself to me or anyone else. Her service record speaks for itself, yet she endured my mockery with grace and professionalism, demonstrating more leadership in her silence than I showed with all my words. He looked directly at her. Captain, I offer you my sincere and unreserved apology. My behavior was inexcusable. I failed to live up to the standards expected of officers. I failed to honor the values of respect and dignity that should guide all military service. I am deeply sorry. He stepped back from the podium. Sloane came forward next, her face pale but resolute. Captain Whitlock. Her voice carried across the parade ground. I spent years fighting to be recognized as a capable operator in a male-dominated field. I endured harassment and constant questioning of my abilities. And yesterday, the moment I found some authority of my own, I turned around and inflicted that same treatment on another woman. Her voice cracked, just slightly. I made assumptions based on your appearance and your position. I questioned your legitimacy. I was cruel. I did to you exactly what was done to me. And I have no excuse for that hypocrisy. You endured 6 years of combat operations that I can't even imagine. And I treated you like you were nothing. I'm ashamed of myself. I'm sorry. She saluted. Mara returned it, crisp and steady. Sloane held the salute a long moment before her hand finally dropped. General Ellery took the podium. This base will learn from yesterday's events. We will implement new protocols for how we treat all personnel, regardless of rank or position. We will remember that every person here, maintenance, administration, security, combat forces, plays a vital role in our mission, and we will never again make the mistake of judging someone's worth by their appearance or job title. He gestured for Mara to join him. She walked forward, and 800 people came to attention simultaneously. The sound of that many boots hitting the ground together rolled across the field like thunder. Captain Whitlock has agreed to accept a position as a training instructor at this facility. She will be working with our most advanced candidates, teaching the kind of real-world skills that can only come from actual combat experience. Those of you selected for her courses should consider it the highest honor and the toughest training you will ever receive. Applause started somewhere in the ranks and spread fast. Within seconds, the entire formation was clapping, then cheering. Some of the senior NCOs, men who'd deployed a dozen times and seen the worst combat had to offer, had tears on their faces they didn't bother hiding. Mara stood at the podium, looking out at hundreds of faces, and for the first time, in longer than she wanted to admit, she felt something other than grief and exhaustion. She felt pride. Not in her combat record, not in her decorations, in this moment, in the possibility of passing her knowledge forward to the people who would need it most. "Thank you," she said simply. "I look forward to working with you." But somewhere, in a locked case tucked beneath a folded stack of civilian clothes in her apartment closet, an encrypted phone sat dark and silent, waiting, because Mara Whitlock had made a promise to her father, to stay, to live something close to a normal life for whatever time he had left. And she had no idea yet how soon that promise would be tested. The apartment smelled like her father's coffee, always too strong, always made exactly the same way for 30 years. Mara stood in the kitchen doorway at 6 in the morning, still in her running clothes, watching Walter Whitlock sit at the small table, with his hands wrapped around a mug he wasn't drinking from, because some mornings he forgot to drink it. Just held it, like the warmth mattered more than the coffee itself. "Morning, Dad." He looked up, and for one terrible second, his eyes didn't find her, didn't land anywhere, searched the space like a man reading a room he didn't recognize. Then something clicked back into place. Mara, relief. Small and quiet and enormous all at once. "Yeah, Dad, it's me. You look tired. Long run." He nodded slowly, set the mug down. His hands weren't as steady as they used to be. Nothing about him was as steady as it used to be. Not since Fallujah put a piece of shrapnel somewhere in his brain that surgeons couldn't reach without killing him. Not since the traumatic damage had started its slow unwinding years later. The kind of injury that doesn't announce itself until it does. "They said you got a promotion," he said, "at the base." "Instructor position," Mara said, sitting across from him. "Teaching now instead of mopping floors." "That's good." His face brightened, genuine, unguarded. "That's real good, Xiao." He stopped, frowned. Something crossed his face like a cloud moving fast across open water. "Sorry. I don't know why I said that." "It's fine, Dad. It's not fine. I don't even know what it means." Because that was the cruelest part. Not the forgetting, the almost remembering. The words that surfaced from somewhere deep and old and then dissolved before either of them could catch what they meant. Mara reached across the table, covered his hand with hers. "It's okay. You don't have to know what it means." He looked at her for a long moment. "You were always the strong one," he said. "Even when you were little. Your mother used to say you came out of the womb standing at attention." Mara laughed. Small, real. "That sounds like something she'd say. She was funny, your mother. Sharp, too, sharper than me. I remember, Dad. I know you do." He squeezed her hand. "That's why I need you to remember for both of us now. Because some days I'm going to forget things, important things, and I need you to hold on to them for me. I will. Promise. I promise." He nodded, satisfied, and picked the coffee back up, and this time he actually drank it. And Mara sat there watching her father's hands shake around a mug and felt something in her chest that had no name and no bottom. At Camp Ravensworth, the training facility had been rebuilt around her like a stage constructed for a play nobody had written yet. New mats, new equipment lockers, a classroom wing that had been converted from an old supply depot, still smelling faintly of cardboard and machine oil underneath the fresh paint. 20 candidates sat in front of her on the first day. SEAL hopefuls, Force Recon aspirants, the best the Navy and Marine Corps had decided to feed into this particular pipeline. All of them watching her with the specific mixture of awe and suspicion, reserved for legends who'd suddenly become real people standing in a room. "Forget everything impressive you've heard about me," she told them. "It doesn't matter. What matters is what you learn in this room. Silence. The good kind. The kind where people actually listen. I'm not here to tell you war stories. I'm not here to show off. I'm here to teach you how to survive when everything goes wrong. Because it will go wrong. Plans fail. Equipment breaks. People die. And when that happens, the only thing standing between you and a body bag is your training." She moved to the center of the mat. "Real combat isn't like the movies. It's not clean. It's not heroic. It's chaos and fear, and making the best decision you can with incomplete information in under 3 seconds. Most of you will never face the situations I'm about to describe. If you're lucky, you never will. But if you do, I want you to walk away. I want you to go home to your families. That's why I'm here. Petty Officer Ellis raised a hand. The same young sailor who'd noticed her breathing pattern that first day, weeks ago, before any of them knew what they were looking at. Ma'am, how did you survive 21 days alone? Behind enemy lines, Mara considered the question. Long enough that the room felt the weight of it. I'll tell you, but not as a story of triumph. As a lesson in what happens when preparation meets opportunity. She pulled up a map on the screen. Terrain lines. A valley marked in faded red. Operation designation classified. August 2019. My team inserted into this valley to capture a high-value target. Intel was bad. We walked into an ambush. 2 KA immediately. 1 wounded. I was the only one still mobile. Her voice stayed level, professional. But there was weight behind every syllable. I had 2 choices. Fight through and try to recover the bodies, which would have resulted in my death with near certainty. Or evade. Survive. Make sure someone got home to tell their families what happened. She clicked through terrain images. I chose survival. The room had gone completely still. First week, I moved only at night. Maybe 3 kilometers a night. Ate whatever I could find that wouldn't kill me faster than staying put would. Lost close to 20 pounds in 3 weeks. Had 2 close calls with hostile patrols. Avoided them because I'd studied their movement patterns during earlier operations. Knowledge saved my life more than any weapon did. She looked at Ellis directly. Second week, I developed an infection from a shrapnel wound. No antibiotics, no medical supplies. I packed it with what I could find and improvised the rest. Old field trick, it worked. Third week, I found a dry riverbed heading toward friendly territory. Followed it for 12 days. On day 21, I stumbled into a forward operating base manned by soldiers who genuinely thought I was a ghost. She let that sit. I survived because of 3 things. 1. I never stopped thinking. Panic kills faster than bullets do. 2. I used every skill I'd ever learned, no matter how small it seemed at the time. 3. I had a reason to survive. My father, my team's families. Someone needed to come home and tell the story. She clicked the screen off. That's the lesson. Skills matter. Knowledge matters. But having a reason to fight matters most. Find your reason before you deploy. Hold on to it when everything goes dark. Let it pull you home. Nobody said anything for a long moment, because some silences say more than applause ever could. The weeks folded into each other after that. Training in the mornings. The medical center in the afternoons, sitting beside her father through appointments that grew longer and more complicated with each passing month. Evenings spent grading tactical assessments at the kitchen table, while Walter watched old game shows he half remembered the rules to. Sloane started showing up more. At first it was official, liaison duties, coordination on training schedules, but somewhere around the 3rd week, it stopped being official and started being something else. You don't have to keep doing this, Mara told her one evening. Both of them sitting in the break room after a long training day, coffee gone cold in paper cups between them. The apology. I heard it. I accepted it. I know, Sloane said. I'm not doing it for the apology anymore. Then why? Sloane was quiet for a moment, looked at her cup instead of at Mara's face. Because I spent my whole career being the only woman in every room, fighting for every inch. And somewhere along the way, I decided that meant nobody else got to have it easier than I did. Which is a garbage way to think, but I didn't know that until I watched myself do it to you. Mara didn't say anything. Just let her keep going. My mother had 6 brothers, Sloane said. Grew up on a farm in Nebraska. Nobody ever asked what she wanted. They just told her what she was for. And when I joined the Navy, she cried. Not because she was scared. Because she thought I was finally going to get to choose something for myself. She looked up. I think I forgot that somewhere. Along the way, Mara sat with that for a moment. My mother died when I was 12, she said quietly. Car accident. Icy road 3 days before Christmas. My father raised me alone after that. Taught me to shoot before he taught me to drive. Some people would call that strange. Was it strange? No, Mara said. It was love. Just a version of it he knew how to give. Sloane's eyes went bright. I think that's the first personal thing you've told me since I've known you. Don't get used to it. But something had shifted between them, small, real, the kind of shift that doesn't announce itself with music or fireworks. Just quietly rearranges the furniture of a friendship until one day you look up and realize the room is different than it used to be. October brought cold mornings and longer shadows across the parade ground. Walter had 2 good weeks in a row, the kind where his memory held steady enough that Mara let herself hope quietly, guiltily, that maybe the doctors were wrong about the timeline. Then came a Tuesday that took the hope back. She found him in the living room, sitting in his chair, staring at a photograph on the wall like he'd never seen it before. "Dad." He didn't look at her. "Dad, it's me." "Where's Elena?" he asked, his voice small, confused. Elena was Mara's mother's name. "Dad, Mom passed away a long time ago." His face crumpled, not like a man remembering something sad, like a man hearing devastating news for the very first time. "No," he said. "No, that's not. When did that happen?" 16 years ago, Dad." He started to cry, real, confused, frightened tears, and Mara crossed the room and knelt beside his chair and held his hand while he grieved a wife he'd already grieved 1,000 times before. Each time like the first, each time cutting exactly as deep, because that was the disease. It didn't just steal his memories, it stole his ability to heal from losing them. She held him until the crying stopped, until his breathing evened out, until, 20 minutes later, he blinked and looked at her and said, completely calm, completely present, "Mara, when did you get here?" "I've been here, Dad." Oh, his brow furrowed. "Did something happen?" "No," she lied gently, because there was no version of the truth that would help him now. "Nothing happened. I just came to check on you." That night, after he'd fallen asleep, Mara sat on the small balcony of their apartment with a mug of tea going cold in her hands, watching the lights of Camp Ravensworth glow faint on the horizon. She thought about the 21 days, the river bed, the infection she'd packed with whatever she could find because there was no other option. She'd survived that, walked out of hell on her own 2 feet because she refused to stop thinking, refused to stop moving, refused to let go of the reason that kept pulling her forward. But this, watching her father disappear in pieces, a little more each week, unable to fight it, unable to outthink it, unable to do anything except sit beside him and hold his hand while the disease took whatever it wanted. This was harder than the war had ever been, because in the war there had been an enemy she could see, a terrain she could study, a plan she could build. Grief didn't work that way. Grief just took. Her phone buzzed on the small table beside her. Not the encrypted one, still dark, still locked in its case. Her regular phone, a text from Sloan. "Thinking about you tonight. No reason, just wanted you to know." Mara looked at the message for a long moment, then typed back, "Thank you. That actually helps more than you'd think." Because 6 months ago, she would have deleted a message like that without responding. Would have told herself she didn't need anyone checking on her, didn't need friends, didn't need anything except the mission and the next objective and the next. But 6 months ago, nobody had known who she really was. And now, somehow, in a strange, complicated, undeserved way, she had people. Walsh, who still checked in every week without fail. Brooks, who'd started bringing her coffee before early morning training sessions without being asked. Alvarez, who'd quietly become her father's advocate at the medical center, cutting through red tape that would have taken Mara weeks to navigate alone. And Sloan, who had gone from enemy to something that felt improbably like family. She hadn't asked for any of it. She wasn't sure she deserved it, but she was starting, slowly, carefully, to let herself have it anyway. November brought the worst appointment yet. Dr. Reyes, the neurologist who'd been treating Walter for 2 years, sat across the desk from Mara with a folder open between them and an expression she'd learned to recognize. The expression that came before bad news. "The scans show significant progression," Reyes said, "faster than we'd hoped. I want to be honest with you, Captain Whitlock, because I know you'd want that." "Give it to me straight," Mara said. Her voice steady, the voice she used for mission briefings, the voice that didn't shake even when everything underneath it was shaking. We're looking at months now, not years. I'd estimate somewhere in the range of 4 to 6, though these things are never exact. The room went very quiet. Mara had survived 21 days alone in hostile terrain, had taken shots that should have killed her and walked away, had built a wall inside herself brick by brick over 6 years of deployments, the kind of wall that let her function when everyone around her would have broken. That wall didn't move now, not visibly, not where anyone could see, but something behind it cracked, quiet and total, like ice giving way beneath still water. Is there anything, she started? We're managing his comfort, his quality of life, but the underlying damage isn't something we can reverse. I'm sorry, she nodded. Once, the way she'd been trained to nod at bad news in the field, acknowledge it, absorb it, keep moving, because falling apart wasn't a look operators got to have in the moment. The falling apart happened later, always later, alone. That night, she sat beside her father's bed, long after he'd fallen asleep, watching his chest rise and fall in the dim glow of the nightlight he now needed to sleep, the one that kept the confusion at bay if he woke disoriented in the dark. She thought about the mission report she'd never gotten to file. The family she'd promised herself she'd help however she could, from wherever she landed. She thought about her mother's grave, about the folded flag from her mother's own father's funeral, tucked in a box in the closet, waiting for a day Mara had spent 6 years refusing to imagine. And she thought, quietly, fiercely, that whatever time was left, she was going to spend every single hour of it exactly here. No missions, no consultations, no encrypted phone. Just this, just him. Just the last chapter of a story that had already given her everything worth having. December came cold and gray, the kind of Virginia winter that never quite committed to snow, but never let you forget it might. Walter had a good stretch, 3 weeks where his mind held together, better than it had in months, and Mara let herself breathe a little easier, let herself hope, in the small, careful way she'd learned not to trust anymore, but couldn't quite stop doing. On a Sunday afternoon, sitting together on the small couch with a football game neither of them was really watching, Walter turned to her with a clarity that made her chest tighten. I need to tell you something, he said, while I can. While I'm still here to say it right. Dad, let me finish. He took her hand, his grip stronger than it had been in weeks. I know what's coming, Mara. I've known for a while now, even on the bad days, somewhere underneath. And I need you to hear this before I can't say it clearly anymore. She held his hand tighter, said nothing. Because some moments you don't interrupt. You gave up everything for me, he said. Your career, your teaching position, your world, all of it, for a mop and a maintenance uniform, just to be near me. And I let you do it because I needed you. But I need you to hear this now, clearly, while I can still make sure the words land right. His eyes held hers. Real warriors know when to fight and when to hold position, he said. You held position for me. That was never weakness. That was the hardest kind of courage there is. But when I'm gone, Mara, I need you to know it's all right to fight again. If they call, if they need you, I need you to know I'll understand. Dad, I don't want to think about. Listen to me. His voice, for just a moment, was the voice of the Marine he'd once been, steady and certain and impossible to argue with. Your mother would understand. We raised you to be a warrior. Don't stop being one just because you're afraid of losing me. Losing me isn't losing yourself. Don't let it become that. Tears were running down her face now, unashamed, unguarded, the walls she'd built over 6 years of combat, finally giving way in the quiet of a living room on a gray Sunday afternoon. I promise, she whispered. Promise me something else, he said. Anything. Promise me you'll live, not just survive. Live, laugh, love, find joy, real joy, the kind that isn't just relief that the mission's over. You've earned that. You earned that a long time ago. I promise, Dad, he smiled satisfied, and settled back against the couch cushions, and within minutes, his breathing had evened into sleep, and Mara sat beside him, holding his hand and memorizing the exact shape of his face in the gray winter light, because some part of her, the part that had survived 21 days on instinct alone, already knew. 2 weeks later, Staff Sergeant Walter Whitlock, United States Marine Corps, retired, passed away peacefully in his sleep, his daughter beside him, holding his hand until the very last breath left his body, and the room went quiet in a way it had never been quiet before. The funeral was held on a bitterly cold morning at Arlington National Cemetery, full military honors, a flag folded 13 times by white-gloved hands and presented to a daughter who had once carried men twice her size out of burning wreckage without breaking stride and now could barely hold the flag without her hands shaking. General Ellery delivered a eulogy that spoke of duty and sacrifice, and the quiet kind of heroism that never made headlines. Hundreds of Marines attended. Men who'd served with Walter decades ago. Men Mara had trained in the months since her identity became known. Men who understood, in a way civilians never fully could, exactly what this family had given. Mara stood at graveside in her dress uniform, the one she'd only just started wearing again, accepting the folded flag with steady hands. She didn't cry. Not during the service. Marines didn't cry in public, not even the ones who'd earned the right 10 times over. But afterward, standing alone at the grave as the sun sank low and pale over the endless white headstones, she let the tears come. Not tears of regret, not anger. Tears of gratitude for the time they'd had. For the lessons he'd taught her, in a childhood built around discipline and love, braided together so tightly she'd never learned to tell them apart. For the man he had been, imperfect and devoted and, in the end, exactly the father she'd needed. Walsh found her there an hour later. Didn't say anything at first. Just stood beside her in silent support, the way soldiers do when words would only get in the way. Eventually others joined: Ellis, Brooks, Alvarez, even Sloan and Voss, a small, quiet honor guard of people who had learned, over the past several months, exactly what this woman had sacrificed and wanted her to know, in whatever small way they could, that she wasn't alone. "He was proud of you," Walsh finally said. "Anyone could see that. I hope so. I know so." He hesitated. "I visited him once, about a month ago. He talked about you for 2 hours straight, about how you were the best Marine he'd ever known, how you embodied everything the Corps was supposed to be." She managed a small, broken smile. "Thank you for telling me that." They stood together as darkness settled over Arlington, and eventually, one by one, they left, until only Mara remained, alone in the enormous quiet of 10,000 identical white stones. She placed her hand against her father's headstone, cold marble under her palm. "Semper Fi, Papa, until we meet again." She turned and walked away, leaving behind the warrior's grave, but carrying forward, somehow, the warrior's spirit. January arrived and brought with it a strange, hollow kind of peace. Mara returned to teaching 2 weeks after the funeral, because staying home in an apartment full of her father's absence had proven harder than any deployment she'd ever survived. The training facility, at least, gave her something to hold on to, a schedule, a purpose, faces that needed what she had to give. She'd been offered housing on base, declined it, needed the space, the quiet, the slow work of figuring out who she was, without the daily rhythm of appointments and medications, and the particular fear that lived inside loving someone whose mind was leaving before their body did. The apartment was too big now, too quiet. She made tea most nights, and sat on the balcony overlooking the base lights in the distance, and let herself remember, and let herself grieve, and slowly, achingly, let herself begin to imagine a future that didn't have her father in it. She had not opened the sealed duffel bag in her closet since the day she retired. She told herself she never would again. The call came on a Thursday night in late January, 3 weeks after the funeral, at 11:47, the kind of hour that never brings good news. Not a text this time, an actual call, encrypted line. The phone she'd kept locked in its case, dark and silent for 6 months, buzzing to life on the kitchen counter with a sound that felt, in the stillness of the apartment, like a gunshot. She stared at it for 3 full rings before she answered. "Whitlock, Captain. This is Phantom Actual." Her stomach dropped straight through the floor. "I'm retired," she said. "You know that, we know. This isn't a request for reactivation. Not yet. It's a request for consultation. Urgent. What's the situation?" A pause on the line. The kind of pause that meant whatever came next was going to be bad. 2 hours ago, a domestic extremist cell seized control of a private research contractor facility outside Roanoke, Virginia, advanced weapons systems testing site. Classified projects. They're holding 14 employees hostage. Federal negotiators are engaged, but the facility layout is compartmentalized in ways that are giving our tactical teams serious problems. We need someone who understands both the architecture of that specific building and the psychological profile of the group that took it. Why me? Because you consulted on the original security design for that facility 4 years ago. Before your status changed, your name is on the classified schematics. Mara closed her eyes, pressed her palm flat against the cold kitchen counter, grounding herself the way she'd been trained to, the way that had kept her alive in worse rooms than this one. I can review documents, provide analysis, remotely. We need someone on site. The negotiation team specifically requested you by name once they pulled your file. There's a Marine on that hostage list, Captain. One of the security contractors inside. His name is Derek Voss. The floor tilted under her. Say that again. Derek Voss. Former lieutenant, currently working private security contracting since his separation from active duty 8 months ago. He's one of the 14 hostages. Mara stood absolutely still in her kitchen, the phone pressed hard against her ear, and felt something enormous and complicated crack open in her chest. Voss, the man who'd once kicked over her mop bucket in a corridor and called her sweetheart in front of 40 witnesses, the man who'd spent months afterward becoming, slowly, painfully, something like a genuine colleague, someone who'd apologized without being asked twice. Someone who'd sat in her classrooms every single week for 3 months, absorbing everything she taught with a hunger that had surprised her. Someone who'd separated from the Marine Corps 8 months ago and never told her why. And now he was inside a compound full of extremists, with weapons neither of them fully understood, and somewhere in Roanoke, Virginia, on American soil, in a country that was supposed to be the one place he was safe. Captain, the voice on the line said. We need an answer. The situation is deteriorating. We have a narrow window before this becomes something none of us can walk back from. Mara looked at the sealed duffel bag she could see through the open closet door down the hallway, looked at the photograph on the wall of her and her father, taken the year before the diagnosis, both of them laughing at something the camera had frozen but memory hadn't kept. She thought about her father's hand in hers on that gray Sunday afternoon. Real warriors know when to fight and when to hold position. You held position for me. When I'm gone, I need you to know it's all right to fight again. She thought about a promise made in a living room 3 weeks before the funeral, and another promise made 3 weeks after it, both of them still sitting warm and unresolved in her chest. How long do I have to decide? She asked. Wheels up in 90 minutes if you say yes. This is voluntary, Captain. Nobody's ordering you. She looked at the clock on the wall, 11:51. Send the extraction team, she said. I'm in. She hung up the phone and stood in the kitchen for exactly 10 seconds, letting herself feel everything at once, the grief and the fear and the strange electric readiness that had been dormant in her body for 6 months and was now, without permission, wide awake. Then she walked down the hallway, opened the closet door, knelt in front of the sealed duffel bag she'd told herself she'd never open again, unzipped it. Inside, combat gear, folded with the precision of a woman who never did anything halfway. Tools of a life she'd set down for love and had never fully expected to pick back up. Her hand hovered over the zipper for a long moment, because some part of her, quiet and honest, knew exactly what this meant. Knew that the woman who walked out of this apartment in the next 90 minutes was not entirely the same woman who'd spent the last 6 months learning how to grieve and teach and let people in, but another part of her, the part her father had raised, the part that had survived 21 days alone on instinct and training and a reason to come home, knew something else entirely. Derek Voss had learned from her, had grown because of her, had become, against every early impression, someone worth risking everything for. and Mara Whitlock had never, not once in her entire life, left anyone behind who was still worth saving. She pulled the gear from the bag, began methodically to prepare. 40 minutes later, dressed and ready, she stood in her father's empty room one last time, looking at the neatly made bed, the folded flag on the dresser, the framed photograph of a man in dress blues standing beside a much younger version of herself. "I hear you, Dad," she said, quietly, to the empty room, to the memory, to whatever part of him might still be listening somewhere, beyond the reach of any scan or diagnosis. "I'm fighting again. Just like you said I could." She turned off the light, closed the door, and walked out into the cold Virginia night to answer a call she'd promised herself 6 months ago she would never answer again. The extraction vehicle was waiting exactly where they said it would be. Engine running, headlights cutting twin beams through the dark. A young agent she didn't recognize held the door open as she approached, duffel slung over one shoulder, expression unreadable, in the way that had once made grown admirals nervous in a hallway. "Captain Whitlock," the agent said. "Thank you for coming." Mara climbed into the vehicle without answering, because there wasn't time for pleasantries. Because somewhere outside Roanoke, a man who'd once mocked her for holding a mop wrong was sitting inside a compound full of armed extremists. And every minute that passed was a minute closer to something none of them would be able to undo. As the vehicle pulled away from the curb, she pulled out her phone one last time and typed a single message to Sloan. "Called back in. Voss is a hostage. I'm going." The response came almost instantly, like Sloan had been sitting awake, waiting for something, anything, from a woman she'd learned, over the past 6 months, to genuinely love as a friend. "Go get him. And come back, both of you." Mara closed her eyes. Let the promise settle into her chest alongside the grief and the fear and the readiness. Then she opened them again and looked out at the dark Virginia highway rushing past and let the last 6 months of learning how to live fold themselves quietly beneath the muscle memory of a life she'd never fully left behind. Because somewhere ahead of her, a man needed rescuing, and Mara Whitlock, whatever else she had become, was still, underneath everything, a warrior who never left anyone behind. The forward staging area sat behind a police perimeter, 2 miles from the research facility, a cluster of unmarked vehicles and canvas tents, thrown up fast in a gravel lot that had probably been empty pasture land a decade ago. Red and blue lights strobed against a low January fog. Mara stepped out of the extraction vehicle into air cold enough to bite through her jacket. And the first thing she saw was a wall of monitors glowing blue inside the command tent. The second thing she saw was Admiral Bannister. Because the universe had a sense of humor about full circles, and here he was, again, older by 6 months and considerably humbler, standing beside a federal negotiator, with a headset looped around his neck. "Captain Whitlock," he said. "Thank you for coming." She didn't waste time on pleasantries. "Give me the layout." A young analyst named Priya Nair, the same warrant officer who'd pulled Mara's classified file a lifetime ago, hurried forward with a tablet already loaded with schematics. "Ma'am, this is the facility you consulted on 4 years ago. East Wing, West Wing, and the underground testing corridor you designed the security protocol for." Mara's eyes moved across the blueprint fast, cataloging, remembering. Because she'd walked these hallways once, years ago, in a different life, wearing a different uniform, thinking about entirely different things. How many hostiles? 6 confirmed, possibly 8, heavily armed domestic extremist cell, anti-government ideology, believed to be targeting the facility specifically because of the classified weapons research housed in the West Wing, and the hostages, 14 employees, mostly research and administrative staff, 1 security contractor, Voss. "Yes, ma'am. Where is he being held?" Nair hesitated. "That's the problem. We don't know. Cell service is jammed inside the compound. Our last confirmed sighting had him in the East Wing near the server room, but that was 90 minutes ago." Mara studied the schematic again, found the section she was looking for, a narrow maintenance corridor running beneath the East Wing, connecting to the underground testing area. through a series of utility access points that had never made it onto the official building plans, because she was the one who'd insisted they be left off 4 years ago, precisely for a scenario like this one. "There's a way and they don't know about," she said. Bannister leaned forward. "What way?" "Maintenance tunnel. Runs beneath the east wing, connects to a utility shaft I had built during the original security consultation. It's not on any blueprint the extremists could have accessed. Even the facility's own current security team probably doesn't know it exists." The negotiator, a tired-looking man named Agent Whitfield, no relation, rubbed his eyes. "Captain, with respect, our tactical teams have trained protocols for a hostage situation like this. Federal breach teams are staged and ready." "And how long until they move?" Mara asked. Whitfield hesitated. That hesitation told her everything. "Negotiations have stalled," he admitted. "The cell leader is making demands that can't be met. Political statements, media access. If this drags past dawn, we're looking at a full tactical breach through the front entrances. Best case scenario, we lose 2, maybe 3 hostages in the crossfire. Worst case." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Mara looked at the schematic one more time. At the tunnel that existed, because 6 years ago, before any of this, before Fallujah's echo finally caught up with her father, before a mop bucket and a corridor and an admiral who'd learned humility the hard way, she'd sat in a design meeting and insisted on a backup access point nobody else thought they'd need. "I can get a small team in through that tunnel," she said. "Quiet insertion, no breach alarm. We locate the hostages, secure the east wing, and create an opening for your tactical team to move without a firefight through the front." Bannister looked at her. "Captain, this isn't a sanctioned military operation. This is domestic soil. Federal jurisdiction." "I know exactly what it is, Admiral." "Then you know the risk you're taking. If something goes wrong in there, there's no classified cover for this. No redacted file. This happens in the open." Mara met his eyes. 14 people are in that building. One of them is a Marine who used to call me sweetheart in a hallway, and then spent 3 months in my classroom becoming somebody with worth being proud of. I'm not standing out here running scenarios while he bleeds out on a server room floor. Silence in the tent. Then Agent Whitfield spoke. Quiet, decisive. "What do you need, Captain?" 4 operators, she said. "People I trust, and 30 minutes. She already had names in mind. The team assembled in the back of a windowless equipment van. 40 minutes later, engines idling, breath fogging in the cold. Mara had made 3 calls from the staging area, and every single one had been answered before the second ring. Master Sergeant Danny Walsh climbed in first, gear already checked twice out of habit. The same steady presence he'd been since that first day in the corridor, when he'd felt something cold slide down his spine and trusted it. "Ma'am," he said, settling in across from her. "Been a while since anyone called me for this kind of work. Feels different this time, doesn't it?" "Feels like it matters more," he said. "Because it's home ground. Because it's one of ours out there." Petty Officer Ellis climbed in next, older now by 6 months of hard training under Mara's instruction, moving with a confidence that hadn't existed in that first classroom session. Behind him, a young Force Recon graduate named Ortiz, one of Mara's top students from the winter cohort, quiet and focused, and clearly still processing the fact that he was riding into a live operation beside the instructor whose classified file had once broken an entire chain of command. And last, climbing in with the careful economy of movement Mara had personally drilled into her over 3 months of advanced training, came Commander Vivian Sloan. "You didn't have to come," Mara said. "Yes, I did," Sloan said, checking her own weapon with steady hands. "You went to bat for me when nobody else would have. This is how I pay it forward." Mara looked at her team. 4 people who trusted her enough to walk into an unknown building full of armed extremists on the strength of a plan drawn up in 20 minutes in the back of a cold van. She thought, briefly, unexpectedly, of her father. Real warriors know when to fight and when to hold position, he'd told her. "You held position for me. When I'm gone, I need you to know it's all right to fight again." She hadn't expected fighting again to feel like this. Not like duty, not like obligation. like family, choosing to walk into danger together, because that's what family does. "All right," she said, pulling up the schematic on a small tablet. "Here's the plan." The maintenance tunnel entrance sat behind a rusted utility auto, half hidden by overgrown brush, 200 yards from the facility's perimeter fence, exactly where Mara remembered leaving it 4 years ago. The lock had been changed since then. It took Walsh 11 seconds to defeat it anyway. Inside, the air was cold and stale and smelled like standing water and old concrete. Mara led with a small flashlight cupped in her palm, the beam narrow enough to avoid casting shadows that might carry through cracks in the tunnel above. Behind her, single file, the rest of the team moved in near total silence, boots placed with the deliberate care of people who'd trained for exactly this kind of quiet. 200 meters in, the tunnel forked. Left toward the West Wing testing area. Right toward the East Wing server room, where Voss had last been sighted. They went right, because Mara had memorized this layout 4 years ago, back when it was just an engineering problem to solve, back before any of the people walking through it tonight had names she knew, faces she'd trust her life to. The tunnel narrowed as they approached the access point beneath the East Wing. Mara held up a fist, and the team stopped instantly, breathing controlled, weapons ready. She listened. Footsteps overhead. 2 sets, moving slow. A voice muffled through the concrete, speaking in short-clipped sentences that carried the particular cadence of someone giving orders they expected to be obeyed without question. She turned to her team, formed silent hand signals in the dim light. 2 hostiles directly above. Access point 20 meters ahead. Proceed with caution. They moved. The access hatch, when they reached it, sat exactly where the 4-year-old schematic promised it would. A rusted metal panel set into the tunnel ceiling, secured from below by a simple bolt mechanism Mara had insisted on during the original design specifically. Because it could be operated silently, she looked up at the panel, felt the weight of the moment settle onto her shoulders. Because somewhere above this hatch, 14 people were trapped in a building with armed extremists, and one of them was a man who'd once kicked over her mop bucket, and then, months later, sat in the front row of her classroom taking notes like his life depended on getting every word right, which tonight it might. She reached up, released the bolt, pushed the panel open, slow silent, into a dark equipment closet, exactly where she remembered it being. She climbed through first, because that's what leaders did. They went first into the dark so the people behind them didn't have to. The equipment closet opened into a service hallway running parallel to the main East Wing corridor. Mara pressed herself against the wall, listened, heard nothing immediately threatening, and signaled the rest of the team through. One by one they emerged: Walsh, Ellis, Ortiz, Sloan. 5 operators, standing in a dark hallway inside a compound full of hostiles, with no backup, no extraction guarantee, and a mission that had exactly one acceptable outcome. Mara pulled up the schematic one more time, oriented herself, pointed toward a doorway 30 feet ahead. "Server rooms through there," she whispered. "That's our last confirmed location on Voss." They moved. The hallway was narrow, lit by emergency lighting that cast everything in a dim, sickly red. Mara let it point, weapon low but ready, every sense she'd spent 6 years training screaming to full alertness. At the server room door she paused, listened. Voices inside, 2 of them, one female, tight with fear, one male, low, controlled, clearly trying to keep someone calm. Voss, Mara's chest tightened, because she recognized that voice, the particular cadence of a man who'd learned, over months of her instruction, how to hold steady when everything around him wanted to fall apart. She signaled her team, positioned Walsh and Ellis flanking the door, Sloan and Ortiz covering the hallway behind them. Then she opened the door. Inside, the server room was cramped, rows of humming equipment casting blue light across the floor. A young female employee sat against the far wall, knees pulled to her chest, tears streaked silently down her face. Beside her, kneeling, one hand pressed against a wound in his own shoulder, was Derek Voss. His eyes found Mara's the instant the door opened, and for one full second, Disbelief crossed his face like weather. Captain Whitlock, Voss, how are you? Later, she said, moving fast into the room, checking his wound with hands that hadn't lost a single ounce of their old precision. Through and through, shoulder. Not fatal, but you're losing blood you don't have to spare. I thought. He started, then stopped, then tried again. I thought I was going to die in here. Not on my watch, Lieutenant. Not Lieutenant anymore, he said, a ghost of his old grin flickering through the pain. Just Voss now, then not on my watch, Voss. She helped him to his feet, checked the young employee for injuries, found none beyond shock, and turned to her team. 2 hostiles converging from the west, Sloane reported quietly from the doorway. Moving this direction. How many total do we know about now? 6 confirmed, 2 more unaccounted for. Mara looked at Voss, barely standing, blood soaking through the makeshift bandage on his shoulder. Looked at the frightened young woman, still crouched against the server racks. Looked at her team. 4 people who'd walked into this building, because she'd asked them to. We can't hold this position and move 14 hostages at the same time, she said, thinking fast, calculating variables the way she'd been trained to since she was 22 years old sitting in a classroom. That felt 1,000 years away from this one. We need to split. What's the play? Walsh asked. Ellis Ortiz, you're with me. We'll locate the remaining hostages, get them moving toward the tunnel access point. Sloane, Walsh, you cover our exfil route and handle anyone who gets between us and that hatch? Sloane asked. Mara looked at him. At the pain etched into his face, the blood loss slowing his responses. He comes with me, she said. He's not walking fast on that shoulder without help. I can move, Voss said, gritting through it. Don't slow down for me. I'm not slowing down, Mara said. You're keeping up. There's a difference. They moved. The next 12 minutes unfolded in the particular controlled chaos that only people who've trained for exactly this scenario could navigate without falling apart. Mara led her team through the East Wing's darkened corridors, locating hostages in 2s and 3s, huddled in offices and storage closets, terrified, exhausted, disbelieving that rescue had actually come. An administrative assistant, hands shaking so badly she could barely stand. A young researcher who kept apologizing for slowing them down, over and over, until Mara stopped, gripped his shoulder, and told him, firmly, that surviving wasn't something you had to apologize for. A facility manager who'd been whipped for trying to protect a colleague, blood dried along his hairline, and still trying to help others move faster than he could move himself. 14 hostages, gathered one by one, guided through darkened corridors by a woman, most of them would never learn the real name of, moving with a calm efficiency that felt, to the terrified people following her, like the only solid thing left in a world that had come apart. They reached the access point with the tunnel. 11 minutes after the extraction had begun, which was when everything went wrong. Because that's how it always goes. Because plans survive contact with reality exactly as long as they need to, and not 1 second longer. Gunfire erupted from the main corridor behind them. Sloane's voice crackled through the earpiece, tight and fast. Contact rear. 2 hostiles. We're engaged. Mara turned back toward the sound, every instinct screaming to go help, and stopped herself, hard, because leaving 14 civilians unguarded at an open access point was exactly the mistake that got people killed. Ellis, get everyone through the hatch. Now, Ortiz, cover the entrance. Yes, ma'am. She turned to Voss, still standing beside her, despite the blood loss, weapon raised in his uninjured arm, ready to fight even now. You're going through that hatch, she said. Not without you. I'm going back for Walsh and Sloane. That's not a discussion, then I'm coming with you. You have 1 working arm, Voss. I have 1 working arm and 6 years of watching you. Teach me exactly how to fight through worse than this, he said, and there was something in his voice that stopped her cold, something that had grown, slowly, painfully, across 3 months of classroom instruction into something that looked a great deal like devotion. I'm not leaving you in this building alone. Not after everything. There wasn't time to argue. There wasn't time for anything except moving. They moved together, back down the corridor toward the sound of gunfire. Mara in front, Voss covering the flank, with the discipline she'd spent months drilling into him, and found Sloane and Walsh pinned behind an overturned filing cabinet, exchanging fire with two hostiles who'd taken position at the far end of the hallway. Mara assessed the angle in half a second, the way she'd assessed 1,000 angles before, in places far from home, under stakes that had once felt like the only thing that mattered. Except this wasn't overseas. This was Roanoke, Virginia. This was home soil, American ground, and somehow that made every second of it feel sharper, more urgent, more impossible to lose. She moved to a flanking position, weapon steady, despite everything her body had been through in the last 6 months, everything her heart had carried through a funeral and a grave and a promise made in a quiet living room. 2 shots, precise, controlled. Both hostiles down. Clear, she called. Sloane emerged from behind the cabinet, breathing hard, a graze along her forearm she hadn't mentioned until now. "You good?" Mara asked. "I'm good." Walsh took a hit to the vest, knocked the wind out of him, but he's fine. Walsh, still catching his breath, gave a thumbs up that convinced absolutely nobody but was accepted anyway, because there wasn't time for anything else. They regrouped fast, moved back toward the access point, where Ellis and Ortiz had successfully funneled all 14 hostages down through the hatch into the maintenance tunnel below. 2 hostiles remaining, Mara said, checking the schematic one final time. Federal breach team is standing by at the front entrance. We create the opening. They finish this. She turned to her team. We're taking the hostages out through the tunnel. Once they're clear, I'm going to draw whatever's left toward the front entrance and give the breach team a clean shot. "Ma'am, that's not the plan," Ellis said. "That's you alone as bait. It's the plan that gets 14 civilians out, without a single one of them getting hurt in a crossfire," Mara said. "I've done harder things for worse odds." Voss stepped forward, shoulder still bleeding, face pale but resolute. "Then I'm coming with you. You need medical attention. I need to know you're not walking into that alone," he said, and something in his voice cracked, just slightly, just enough for her to hear everything underneath it. "I spent 3 months in your classroom learning what it means to actually be worth something as an operator. I'm not standing in a tunnel while you finish this by yourself." Mara looked at him. At the stubborn set of his jaw, the same defiance that had once made him kick over a mop bucket in a hoist months ago, now aimed at something worth defending instead of something worth mocking. "Fine," she said, "but you follow my lead." "Exactly. Yes, ma'am." She turned to the rest of her team. "Get the hostages through the tunnel. Get them to the staging area. Tell Bannister we're creating an opening at the front entrance in 3 minutes." "Understood," Walsh said. "Be careful, Captain." "Always am." She and Voss moved together through the darkened corridors, toward the facility's main entrance, moving with a particular quiet urgency. 2 people who'd trained together long enough to move as a single unit without needing to speak. Because that's what months of shared discipline built, whether either of them had fully realized it happening or not. Trust. The kind that didn't need words, the kind that just moved, instinctively, in sync, toward whatever came next. At the main entrance, they found the last 2 hostiles positioned behind an overturned reception desk, weapons trained on the glass doors where federal tactical teams waited in the dark beyond the perimeter. Mara pressed herself against the corridor wall, Voss beside her, both of them breathing controlled and even despite everything. "On my signal," she whispered. "What's the signal? I make noise." They turned toward me. "You take the shot on the left, and if something goes wrong, nothing's going wrong," she said, and meant it, because after everything, after 21 days alone in hostile terrain and a father's slow disappearing, and a promise made across a kitchen table, she had absolutely no intention of letting this be the moment things finally fell apart. She stepped out into the open. "Hey," she called, loud, clear, deliberately drawing every ounce of attention in the room. Both hostiles spun toward her. Voss fired once, controlled, precise, exactly the shot she'd drilled into him 100 times over 3 months of training. 1 down. Mara moved simultaneously, closing distance fast, weapon raised, and put down the second, before he could fully process what was happening. Silence, complete, total, overwhelming silence, broken only by the sound of the front doors bursting open as the Federal tactical team finally moved in, clean, unopposed, exactly the outcome Mara had promised 3 hours earlier in a cold command tent. It was over, just like that. The way these things almost never end, except tonight, somehow it had. Voss lowered his weapon, breathing hard, and looked at her with an expression that held something far beyond simple relief. "We did it," he said. "We did it," she agreed. His legs gave out then, all at once, blood loss and adrenaline crash catching up with him simultaneously, and Mara caught him before he hit the ground, lowered him gently, pressed her hand hard against the wound in his shoulder. "Stay with me," she said. "Ambulance is 30 seconds out. Stay with me, Voss. I'm not going anywhere," he said. And even now, even bleeding on a cold reception floor, with Federal agents flooding through the front doors behind them, there was something almost like humor in his voice. "Turns out I'm terrible at leaving when it matters." She almost laughed. Almost. The sound caught somewhere in her throat, tangled up with 6 months of grief and fear, and everything she'd been carrying since a Thursday night phone call had pulled her back into a life she'd sworn she was done with. "Good," she said quietly. "Because I'm terrible at leaving people behind too." The paramedics reached them, seconds later, and Mara stepped back, let them work, watched them load Voss onto a stretcher with the particular efficiency of people who did this every day, and somehow never lost their urgency doing it. As they wheeled him past her toward the ambulance, he reached out, caught her hand. "Thank you," he said, "for coming back for me. After everything I said to you, that first day." "That was a different lifetime," she said. "Still," he said, "I don't think I ever really said it properly. I'm sorry, for all of it." "You already apologized," she said, "months ago, in front of 800 people." "I know," he said, "but I don't think I understood, until tonight, exactly what it cost you to forgive me anyway." Mara held his hand a moment longer, feeling something in her chest that she didn't have a name for yet, something that had been building slowly, quietly, across months of watching a man learn to become someone worth trusting. "Get better," she said. "That's an order." "Yes, ma'am," he said, and let the paramedics wheel him the rest of the way. And Mara stood in the cold parking lot outside a building that had, 3 hours ago, held 14 lives in the balance, and watched the ambulance doors close on a man she was only just beginning to understand she might not want to let go of. The staging area buzzed with the particular controlled chaos of an operation winding down. 14 hostages, all accounted for, all receiving medical evaluation. Federal agents processing the scene. Bannister standing near the command tent, watching Mara approach with an expression she'd never quite seen on him before. "Captain," he said. "That was—" "Save it, Admiral," she said, exhaustion finally cracking through 6 years of trained composure. "We got everyone out. That's what matters. It matters that you did it without a single friendly casualty, on domestic soil, in a situation that had every possibility of becoming a bloodbath." "That's not nothing, Captain. That's extraordinary." She didn't have the energy to argue with him. Sloane approached, arm bandaged, exhaustion written across her face in a way that mirrored Mara's own. "You okay?" Sloane asked. "I don't know yet," Mara said honestly. "Ask me tomorrow." Sloane pulled her into a brief, fierce hug, the kind that didn't need words attached to it. "Your father would be proud," she said quietly. "I know that's not enough right now, but it's true." Mara held on to that. Held on to it hard, the way she'd held on to every reason that had ever pulled her through something impossible. 3 days later, sitting in a private conference room at the Pentagon that smelled like carpet cleaner and old coffee, Mara faced Secretary of Defense Harold Kendrick across a polished table. "Captain Whitlock," he began, "what you did in Roanoke has already reached the highest levels of this administration. 14 civilians alive. A domestic terror cell neutralized without a single hostage casualty. That's the kind of outcome that doesn't happen by accident." "Thank you, sir." I'm authorized to inform you that you've been selected for the Presidential Commendation for Valor. The ceremony would be held publicly, with full media coverage, as an example of exactly the kind of quiet heroism this country needs to see right now. Mara sat with that for a long moment, thought about her call sign, still classified, still redacted from every file that mattered, thought about the 23 Ghost Unit operators, whose identities remained protected. Precisely because exposure meant danger, not just for them, but for the missions still ahead, the operators still active, the entire fragile architecture of secrecy that kept people safe in ways the public would never fully understand. Thought about her father and what he would have said about public recognition versus quiet duty. Mr. Secretary, she said, I'm deeply honored, but I have to respectfully decline the public ceremony. Kendrick raised an eyebrow. May I ask why? Because operators like me exist specifically because our identities stay protected, she said. Because the work doesn't stop just because one mission ends. Because there are still people out there who do this quietly, without cameras, without recognition, and every time one of us steps into the spotlight, it makes their job that much harder. Kendrick studied her for a long moment. Your father was a Marine, he said finally. It's in your file. 25 years of service. Yes, sir. I imagine he'd have understood exactly what you just told me. He would have, Mara said, and for the first time in days, she let herself smile, small and real. He used to say real warriors don't advertise. They do the job, and then they go home. Then let the record show, Kendrick said, that the commendation will be entered into your classified file, officially recognized, quietly held. And Captain, if you ever change your mind about the public ceremony, the offer stands indefinitely. I appreciate that, sir. I don't think I will. I didn't think you would either, he said. And something in his expression suggested genuine respect rather than disappointment. That's precisely why we're having this conversation instead of a press conference. 2 weeks later, Mara stood at the edge of the training facility's outdoor range, watching a new cohort of candidates run through basic drills under Sloane's supervision. Voss stood beside her, arm still in a sling, shoulder healing slower than he wanted it to. Patience clearly not his strongest virtue. You're staring, he said. I'm supervising. You're staring at me specifically, Whitlock. She almost smiled. Fine, I'm staring. Voss turned to face her fully, and something in his posture shifted. Careful, deliberate, the way a man moves when he's about to say something that matters, and knows it. I've been thinking, he said, about what happens next. Next for what? For this. He gestured vaguely between them. A motion that somehow managed to encompass 6 months of transformation, an entire arc from cruelty to devotion, from a hallway confrontation to a bloody rescue mission. Neither of them would ever fully stop carrying. I don't want to just go back to being your former student who occasionally shows up to say thank you. What do you want instead? I want to actually earn a place in your life, he said. Not because I owe you one, because I want to be there, if you'll let me. Mara looked out at the training range, at candidates running drills under a pale winter sun, at a life that had somehow, impossibly, rebuilt itself around her. After losing everything that had once anchored it, she thought about her father's voice in that quiet living room. Promise me you'll live, not just survive. Live, love, find joy, real joy. She thought about 21 days alone in hostile terrain, and about 6 months, learning how to let people back in, one careful relationship at a time, until somehow an entire community had assembled itself around her without her fully noticing it happening. I'd like that, she said quietly. I think I'd like that a great deal. Voss's face broke into something that looked, for the first time since she'd known him, completely unguarded. Yeah, he said. Me too. Spring came slow to Virginia that year, the way it always did, reluctant and gray for weeks before finally committing to warmth. Mara stood on her small balcony on a Sunday morning in April, coffee in hand, watching sunlight finally break through months of winter cloud cover. Her phone buzzed. A text from Sloane. Training schedule for next cohort is finalized. You're leading advanced tactics again starting Monday. Also, Voss wants to know if you're coming to dinner tonight. or if he needs to show up at your door uninvited again. Mara smiled, typed back, "Tell him I'm coming. And tell him if he shows up uninvited, one more time I'm making him run extra drills." "He'd probably enjoy that," Sloane replied. "He's gotten weirdly competitive about impressing you." Mara set the phone down, looked out over the base in the distance, the training facility where she'd rebuilt an entire life out of the wreckage of everything she'd lost. The parade ground where 800 people had once applauded her simply for surviving her own history. The corridor, still there, still ordinary, where a mop and a bucket and a cruel joke had somehow become the opening scene of everything that followed. She thought about the letter her father had written her, the one she'd found tucked inside his Bible 3 weeks after the funeral, unfinished, unsent, dated the week before he died. "Mara," it began. "If you're reading this, it means I ran out of time to say everything I wanted to say out loud. But I need you to know something. You spent your whole life protecting other people, your team, your country. Me at the end when I couldn't protect myself anymore. Somewhere in all that protecting, I hope you remember to let people protect you too. That's not weakness. That's the whole point of love. Letting someone else carry some of the weight. I love you more than any medal ever could measure. Go live the life you earned, Papa." She'd read that letter more times than she could count in the months since finding it, and every time it landed the same way, like grief and comfort arriving together, inseparable, the way they always had been since a car accident on an icy road 3 days before Christmas had taught her, at 12 years old, that love and loss were never really separate things. Her phone buzzed again. Mara Whitlock, retired officer, decorated operator, teacher, daughter, survivor, looked down at the message from a man who'd once-ed her in a hallway, and had somehow, against every reasonable expectation, become someone she trusted with the quiet, unguarded parts of herself she'd spent 6 years learning to protect. She read the message, smiled, set the coffee down, and walked back inside to get ready for dinner, carrying forward, finally fully, the life her father had asked her to live. Not just survive, live.